Recording. Cool. Okay, welcome back to week 9 of our advertising school. This week we are talking about copywriting. Super excited to hear from Brendan Quinn, who he's a partner at Truth and Consequences, which you guys probably recognize. Maggie and Jim, who also spoke in the course, are also from Truth and Consequences. Brendan also is an adjunct professor at Temple. He has spent a ton of time at 160 over 90. Super insightful guy, and obviously from a great agency that's super forward thinking, and love the way that they've kind of interacted with advertising school so far. Before we go dig into that, brief note on the media strategy assignments. I thought there was a ton of like really interesting and great creative thinking in those submissions. I'm still working through the end of them. One of the things that I'm noticing is that there are a lot of like really interesting creative ideas around kind of hijacking apps, and other, like, you know, the assignment being based on finance, being based on this kind of unknown bank. Like, it made sense that a lot of people went to like Venmo, or kind of like new and up and coming mobile apps that are focused on finance. Those are interesting kind of places to think about creatively, but they don't make for great media strategies, because when you're talking about a media strategy, what you need to do is you're looking for places to kind of put your advertising content. So where can you get reach? Where can you pay for reach? Where can you earn reach? Like, how do you get your assets out there into the world? So for media strategy stuff, just as you think about it going forward, you know, the recommendations and like the creativity happens less in the channel that you're recommending and more in, as Jonathan was kind of going through last week, how do the creative assets kind of speak to their placements? I think that's where the real genius in most of his work last week kind of showed through. But this week, fresh week, creative focused. I'm really excited to, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm really excited to like talk about the assignment and see the work that comes out of this session. Brendan, would love to hear from you on how we write better copy.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. And I'm happy to be aboard here. I'm going to start to share my screen. I will note before I begin, so Joe mentioned that I've taught copywriting in a class at Temple University. I did 3 semesters of teaching that class. So each class is usually like 45 hours of lectures that I put together. So trying to compress like 45 hours of work into like 30 minutes was a little tricky. So hopefully this isn't too overwhelming, but you know, as we go through, if you have any questions, like please raise your hand. Then we'll talk through everything at the end. So I will share my screen now. And I will assume everybody can see the screen, because here's some tip that I just heard the other day, that you're supposed to say, I assume everybody can see my screen. Please speak up if you can't see it, because it avoids the awkward, like, please let me know if you can see my screen, because then people have to. So that's my first tip of the day. Useless. Anyway, starting off, I wanted to just kind of share right off the bat, like this image. This is an illustration that I've actually had pinned next to my desk for the majority of my career. If you talk to people, the way advertising talk to people, they punch you in the face. And sure, maybe that's a little bit overboard, but I think that it's important. And one of the things that I'll kind of continually talk about tonight is the fact that, like, copywriting and developing concepts and what you're doing and what you're creating, like, we don't want this to be the invasive, obnoxious advertising that's too much of what we deal with as consumers. Like, we want to develop things that are about creating conversations, like creating dialogue, and really kind of like, you know, being smart and speaking in different ways, because that's really what like the best copywriting should do. So going through, here's what we'll talk about while we're here. So start off with what I've learned over the course of my career, kind of take you through it. Then I asked what people smarter than me have learned. So I kind of crowdsourced some advice to aspiring copywriters and aspiring advertising people, you know, crowdsourcing their advice, and they shared some really like insightful things. take you through a brief selection of some really smart ads, and then take you through the assignment. So to really start off, what the hell is copywriting? Hint, it's not that copyright symbol that you see. I mean, even early on, and I've talked about, I started as a copywriter, and people said, is that the legal thing where you're doing this? And that is, of course, one of the things that you hear, but obviously we know it's not. If you do the whole like lazy Google search, you're going to get a pretty standard poor answer. The activity or occupation of writing the text of advertisements or publicity material. They might as well say that copywriting is the act of writing copy. So how do we actually define it in a better way? You get an image search and you see a bunch of like strange things about what copywriting is. So, a lot of typewriters, some charts, a lot of desks, and then there's a series of, I guess, stock photos of a guy wearing a bow tie, smoking a pipe on a typewriter, which throughout my entire career, I've never done any three of those things while writing copy. So how do we actually define what copywriting is? To me, it's the creation of ideas that help tell a brand, product, or services story that will compel consumers to act in a desired way. So the key there is the idea of the ideas and the story and compelling consumers. And one of the other things that I'll talk about, but I think that is completely like key to all copywriting, is then just like boiling things down to their essence. So really, as I just got into this presentation, I was like, I have to shorten what this actually is. So to me, it's about creating ideas and stories that compel consumers. So it's the idea generation, it's the stories, it's working with an art director or designer to help like flesh ideas and flesh strategies out to life that you're, some of the presentations that you've had in terms of like strategists that are coming to you with, like unique challenges. And then your job is to come up with that compelling way of telling that story to get it across to the consumers. To me, the most successful copywriters have a few traits. Like to say they're relentlessly curious, they're empathetic, they're thick-skinned, and they're people who love to write in some form or another. So relentlessly curious, like you have to, a lot of your life, and there is a lot of assignments that you get where you're genuinely interested in it, but there's also moments where like it's something you may know nothing about. It's something that you may not be that interested in. And you have to have that curiosity to say like, what's the interesting thing about this? Like, how can I find the interesting nugget that will compel people moving forward? Like, you kind of have to have that gene in you to just want to always find and learn about new things and new industries and figure out how to make them interesting. Empathy, you're talking to people who are not necessarily yourself. You have to be able to occupy their mindset, their shoes, be in their place in life and understand it so that you can craft that story into a way that makes sense for them and will be compelling to them. Personally, you have to be thick-skinned because you're writing a lot of stuff, you're developing a lot of concepts, a lot of stuff gets killed. I mean, anybody in the creative department is going to get used to that. I think within copywriting, it can be especially prevalent because pretty much everybody thinks they can write. So your things will be rewritten sometimes by people who will help make it better, sometimes by people who may not make it better. So, but finally, this idea of like people who love to write in some form, like it's not the traditional, like you don't have to be a novelist, you don't have to be a poet, you could be a songwriter, you could be somebody who just writes and finds a voice, and you might have like a great Twitter account, you might have like something in your life that you go to and you express yourself through words. I mean, in the world of Reddit, I think I look at the shower thoughts subreddit because I think it's one of the places that like every day I will go there and see something that's just like taking an everyday thought and bringing like a unique spin to it, which is really a lot of what you do in the world of copywriting. So who am I? Actually, Jonathan, who did last week's class, kind of stole one piece of my shtick, which is showing my student ID card from when I went to school at Penn State. So graduated from Penn State. My undergraduate degree was in advertising, but I will admit I wasn't like the greatest student. I was not like really looking forward in terms of like, how do I build a portfolio? How do I really get a job? Like, in fact, I had like probably the worst mindset possible. Like, I don't need a portfolio, like whatever. I made some stuff in classes. I don't even think I collected them. Probably the worst thing you could do. And all of you, by taking the initiative to be a part of a class like this, are ahead of what I was doing, because I didn't try to get a job right after school. I actually headed for the mountains of Colorado and was a ski bum in Breckenridge, Colorado for a year. It was an incredible time. It was awesome. I recommend trying to take what now is called a gap year, or some time off, or some time away. If you can do it, like doing something like this, the experience was invaluable. It did in the long run did not hurt my career trajectory. And ultimately, I was able to just supplement my income with waiting tables, bartending, and doing things where I was making probably a better salary than I did as my first junior copywriter job. So unfortunately, I know the service industry jobs are not as prevalent right now because of COVID, but if you can figure out to do something like this in life, I would highly recommend it. However, after a certain point, you do get things like this. My mom said, maybe it's time that you actually get a job that's more career focused. So I did move back to the Philadelphia area. I was living with a few roommates, just trying to find like jobs either in journalism, or trying to find like writing jobs, or trying to pick up like freelance work here and there. Not too much was happening. And then after like 2 months, my one roommate said, "Oh yeah, my brother's a creative director," which I was kind of like, I wish you would have shared this information 2 months ago. So his brother is a creative director at a small agency in South Jersey called Panzano and Partners. And I, with no book, with no job, with nothing to lose, basically went into an interview with his brother, David. And he basically just had me like try out. Like, he just had me starting to write ads. He was like, you don't have anything, so let me just see if you can write. Like, and the first assignment that I did was for writing outdoor ads for the Newark International Airport. So that was like the day one, but like, I kind of went into this thing of like, all right, creative director, advertising, like this is going to be Madison Avenue, Don Draper, when in fact it was actually a little bit more like Hot Topic, because that agency, their specialty was in shopping malls and shopping centers. So the clients were a lot of, shopping malls, wrote a million different Santa arrival ads, the Easter Bunny ads, things like that. So that was really what the first step in my career was. So on day one, like I said, it was kind of a tryout, and they were actually pitching a local country club. And this was one of the first ads that I wrote. So this is for Sand Barons Golf Club. Headline: responsible for more sick days than the flu. So this is one of those things where I was like figuring things out, trying to find like a unique way of like talking about a golf club. Workshopped it with David, the creative director. He made it better. Like, we worked through it. Like, he gave me some feedback. And this was one of the lines that they ended up going with and like winning the pitch with. So that was cool. Like, that was like great first day, but I'm not showing a bunch of terrible writing that I did. So, that's really what, like, me taking my time and not like really developing the portfolio, or really being that like serious with everything. Like, I put myself a little bit behind the 8 ball. So at that point, it was like figuring out what copywriting was, how to do it. And like, I just like dug deep into it. Like, after screwing around for a while, I was like, all right, now I'm going to like focus and really like dig deeper into it. I even read books, like, remember those things? Among those books, Luke Sullivan's Hey Whipple Squeeze This. I think a few people in this course have even spoke about this or recommended it. I mean, this book is like just incredible. It's like, even though I believe it's probably 40 years old at this point, they've done updates to it and added new parts to it. But, it's kind of timeless in the approach to like creativity, to clients, to writing, and like how to actually like develop concepts and write. And, I think that it was really eye-opening because of things like this, where Luke Sullivan, the writer, who's a great writer himself, he wrote things like, a brand is the sum total of all the emotions, thoughts, images, history, possibilities, and gossip that exist in the marketplace about a certain company. where I was like, whoa, these like, he is like talking about high level things like branding and how to like break through and like really like interesting things. But the humanity in the book was also in quotes like this: "There's never been a time in my career when I faced the empty page and not been scared. I was scared as a junior assistant copy cub intern, and I'm scared today." That was like reassuring to know that like probably like one of the most well-known or famous or like best copywriters really in history is talking about like imposter syndrome. He's talking about like the anxiety that you get with like a new assignment. And I think that that was one of those things that was like ultimately reassuring to hear. And I will assure hopefully some of you that like today, even as I've been doing this for like 20 years, like there's still moments where I'm like, man, I hope I still have ideas left in me. I hope I still can do this. Like that I think is a good thing to have. Like you need to have a little bit of that like anxiety to be able to write something really well. So also what I did there, they had a huge stack of communication arts, particularly the advertising manuals. And I would just, anytime that I wasn't like working on a project, I'd just be flipping through those. They're a great resource if you want to look and just find like amazing examples of like smart headlines and great writing and like interesting concepts and like ways that like they even just show breakdown like how TV scripts are written and how radio scripts are written. So like you just kind of see a little bit behind the scenes of them. If you can get your hands on these, they're well worth your time to just like sit down and like dive through them. Within it, like there was one example that like totally stood out in my mind, and it was an ad created by the agency DeVito Verde, which is in New York, and it was for Mount Sinai Hospital, and it was this one: "We turned a child who couldn't hear into a typical 2-year-old who doesn't listen." So one of those like pretty simple ads, but at the same time, like in just a few short words, it tells like a real story. And I like, not at the time, I kind of like went back and looked at this and I was trying to figure out like, why does this work? And like, it's built off of like a real insight. Like it's talking about like, as a parent, if you have a child who's sick, like the one thing you want is just your kid to be back to normal. Like it's not about them becoming like this superhero child or something that's unattainable. Like you just want them to be the typical kid who does things that even annoy you and doesn't listen and is a typical 2-year-old. Like wonderful, like perfect insight that really ended up like humanizing the ad, because this is actually an ad about cochlear implants and like cochlear implant surgery, which like is a highly technical thing. And Mount Sinai, luckily, because of the strength of their brand, like people know that they have the ability and the technical ability to like create or to focus on a surgery like that. But this ad shows that they also have the human element of it to really like make sure that they are going to be there caring for your child. And that's really like speaking about the benefits versus the feature. I mean, this is something that like first few creative directors would like just like beat it out of me to like don't just focus on the features. Don't like list a bunch of things that are within the product. Like how does this make the person's life better? Like focus on those benefits. And in this case, it's about like getting your child back to the normal person. Then finally, it's clever, but it's not distractingly clever. Like it's not too cute. It's not trying too hard. It's just like, it hits that perfect note of like, and tone of being the reassuring voice to help your child. So it was one of those like pretty eye-opening like moments. And I was like, that's kind of what I want to be able to do with things that I'm writing, like find all those different benefits and really extract them in ways that can be interesting storytelling. So I spent almost 2 years at that small niche agency and did a lot of bad writing. Like I wrote some crappy puns. I wrote some stuff that like should never have seen the light of day. But I did get in, like it was like working out and figuring out like what was good and like how could I get things past, like how could I get my creative director to approve things? How could I get the clients to see things my way? And like really kind of work out a lot of the kinks. And then I was doing like, I realized I didn't want to write mall ads for the rest of my life. So I did a nights and weekend portfolio. And, here's where I think Jim mentioned in his talk, like you want to like work with other people and like help each other out to build your portfolios. So my art director partner there was a fellow by the name of Brian Anderson. We were both kind of these the young creative team at the agency, and we were kind of going behind the scenes and working on each other's portfolios. Brian now also is the owner of his own agency here in Philadelphia, The Perception. Take a look at their work, take a look at their site. Like, Brian's an awesome guy. If the smallest way I can repay him back is that you guys all check him out and hopefully like be able to work with him. He's always hiring freelance writers in particular. So hit up The Perception and do Brian a solid. So that early career takeaway, it's like getting reps. Like, it's using like the athletic metaphor, but like you need to spend your time like figuring out the craft, like learning the muscle memory of how to write. Like, how can I write like good headlines? How can I like develop concepts like kind of quickly and really work through things to get that muscle memory going and kind of build like a repertoire of like tricks that you have and things that you can pull off and build things in a way that you just become a more confident writer through it. So early in the career, try to get the reps. Like, I was able to write like radio, TV, like outdoor, like all these different things. And like, it just helped me in the long run to be able to get all those different things under my belt. So I went from a small, safe and established place to a small, at the time, but young and ambitious place, 160 over 90. And I was talking to Joe and Dan before this, and they were like, wow, you spent a lot of time there. And like, how'd that happen? And I think part of it was like, I think like the 8th or 9th employee hired at 160. And like, I was just a part of like a place that was continually growing. And like, it was a small, like tight-knit creative team that we had there that like, we were all just like looking to make good work, try to get bigger and better clients. Like, it was cool. It was like, we all collectively kind of won together. And it was just like one of those like really kind of cool things to be a part of a journey for that long, where a place was growing at the rate that it did. Because this is what the office looks like today. This is one of the 160 offices. They have them all over the country and all over the world. I think there's 800 people. So the place went from, I was there with 8, now it's up to 800. So it literally grew like 100 times in a little bit after the time that I was there. When I actually started, like, one of the things that we had was a mice outbreak at our crappy first office, because we were all just like a bunch of like 25-year-old idiots who, in agency offices right before the holidays, your clients will send you a bunch of food. You have all this stuff all around and it's great. Well, right before the holidays, we got all this food and we didn't put it away. And so then the office was closed for a week, and we came back and the place was just like infested with mice. So that's like, that's like the early like startup, like, origin story of a place where like, yes, it's big and fancy and like multinational at this point, but like it all starts somewhere. So, 14 years at a place, what do you do there? Like, it went from the small clients to huge clients. Like, we went from, servicing like local restaurants and like check cashing places to working with, like divisions of Nike and pro sports teams and, Mercedes-Benz and Audi. So it was cool to like have that like exponential growth. We went from being independent to going through 2 different acquisitions. I was there for the first of the 2, and I actually left before the second, because one of the things that I just felt was like, I liked the independent agency like feel. Acquisitions, they have, agencies that are owned by holding companies have, some advantages to them. At that point, I was just not interested in going through that. So I had the promotions from going from like a copywriter to, then I was promoted to creative director, then to a group creative director, and actually given partnership a few years before I left. So, kind of that's like the trajectory that a copywriter can generally have. And I also, built a portfolio over that time. That mid-career takeaway, I would say, is like, stay till you don't grow. Like, people say like, why were you there for that long? And it was because I felt like I was growing like creatively, I was growing professionally, like I was getting opportunities. And like, ultimately when that stopped, like I moved along. There was times where I had conversations throughout about leaving and talked to different places and everything, but it never felt right. So, ultimately, like, stay at a place till you don't grow. And that might be 2 years, that might be 5 years, whatever it may be. So, take that advice and do with it as you may. But ultimately ended up with portfolio. I think Jim shared this during his lecture, but a lot of different brands that I worked on, just showed like the collective time of my agency. I left 160 in 2016 and, 2017, and freelance for 2 years. So I lived the freelancer life, which means a lot of sweatpants and a lot of preparation for the working at home thing that COVID has done to all of us. But freelance life was actually pretty great for me. It was eye-opening. It gave me exposure to a lot of different agencies, a lot of different companies, a lot of like working with some brands directly. But ultimate takeaway from that time was that you have to be your own business. Like you have to be the one who's getting new business. You're doing billings, you're doing like promotion of yourself. You're doing a lot that isn't just related to what you do. So one of those things where a lot of people ask about it. I think it's particularly tough to do unless you have a very big network of people that you can call upon and will call you up. And if you see down here when we post this thing, I wrote a longer article for LinkedIn about like some of my takeaways. So again, if you have time, take a look at that. That ultimately led to last year, we formed Truth and Consequences. So you met Jim and Maggie. We have 2 other partners that are involved with us. And ultimately we're trying to build an agency that is the one that we've wanted to work for our entire careers. So it's small right now, it's independent, we're trying to grow smartly. I think it's one of those things where I would give the recommendation of not starting an agency like right before a global pandemic, but we've been able to actually grow throughout this whole, during the last few months, and knock on wood, hope that we can continue to do so. So agency startup takeaway is to partner with people, partner with and hire people that are smarter than you. I think that that's a wise thing to be able to do, is find people that like can bring more to the table than you can. Always hire people that are smarter than you, and that's what we're doing now. Is we're bringing on new talent and ultimately building our agency. So that's kind of my career in a snapshot. But I also then want to talk about like some advice that I gathered from other writers. So, as I mentioned, you hire people that are smarter than you, and you ask people that are smarter than you to help you write your presentation for Reddit if you ever get the chance. So I reached out to a bunch of writers that I know through various agencies, through different times, and asked them to say, like, what would you tell young creatives or young writers in your place right now? And then just to make it like in the copywriting world, like I said, you have to do it in 8 words or less. And some of the stuff that they came back with was pretty awesome. So I'll share some of those, which I think are good ways of framing like advice to young creatives. So first one, don't use 8 words if 7 work. So Perfect 7 Words, written by Howard Finkelstein, who is the creative director at Fig, which is a small boutique agency in New York that's doing some really cool work. He was at Wieden & Kennedy, New York for like the last 5 years before that. Has a tremendous portfolio, and I think you can tell like his insightful work his insight by creating something like this. Like, don't use 8 words if 7 work. Like, it's absolutely perfect. It's about like making the most of every word that you're writing and everything that you're creating. Like, keep it as tight as possible. Of course, he also gave a second one that he said completely contradicted that, and he said, make ads that don't feel like ads. Hippopotamus. So he wanted to use all 8 words there, but I mean, this is that idea of like, don't make something that feels like that person who's shouting at you. Don't make something that feels like an ad. Make something that's actually really cool, and that's something that people want to engage with. They're not an audience, they're people. This is from a friend of mine who I've known since we were teenagers, Kyle Rango, who's now a group creative director at VaynerMedia in New York. And I think that what you can see there is like, always think of the person on the other end of your communication. Like, imagine them, like, who are they? What are they feeling? Like, that's about that part of like building up that empathy. Like, don't just look at the demographics that are in a brief, like think about the person who you're speaking to. Share your work confidently, seek feedback with humility. So this is Rachel Silverbauer, who is our senior copywriter at Truth and Consequences. And she's just like one tremendous writer, but she's also a great presenter. And I think one of the things that she does when she's presenting, she has that confidence, but she also is like completely open to feedback to figure out like, how can we improve the work? How can like we make the thing better? Which is one of those things where it's like, yes, I want to work with that person. Like that's somebody that I want to work with who's like always got such an open mind for a project, but can also then like, when we're finished with it, she can make it like, she can present it like absolutely beautifully. Write like you speak. So this is from a good friend of mine, Elliot LaBeouf, who is a creative director at Heavy Studios. And, I think that this is one of those things where like, don't overthink these things, like be as simple and direct. I mean, Elliot, I think, had his master's in English that he graduated from college with. So he can obviously write like, he can write with, vocabulary, like a high vocabulary, and like really like speak and write in a high way. But at the same time, like he knows that what he has to do is communicate a brand and a product in a way that's really interesting. Writers have a voice, copywriters have several. This is Chris Blake, who is an executive creative director at 215 Creative. It's in Philadelphia here. He was basically, he's saying there that like, you need to be able to have like range in the work you're doing. Like you can't just be the writer or the creative that just has a kind of like one go-to gear. Like come up with different ideas, come up with different executions, do things that are always going to be surprising, because like you have to be able to serve the brand, but you also have to be able to like advance your career by showing some flexibility in the work you're doing. Forget Microsoft Word. The best writers think visually. So this is my friend Steve Marino, who I've actually known since we were in junior high. But I think what he's pointing out is, don't be that person who's just kind of like, I'm the word person. Like you need to be able to think visually. You need to be able to like think through like a script, like envision what that script is going to be, like envision things. Like I think also just like get away from a computer. Like when I have to write like a script or like a much like more thoughtful thing, I bring out like the pad and paper and like write on that, like just because that gets me away from it. It gets me away from like the world and the distractions. Like I sit down and just try to like think through the ideas, like draw things, sketch them out, like think visually. Give it heart, make it smart. So this is from Ryan Durer, who he has been a writer at a lot of great places. He was also at the Martin Agency in Richmond, where he most famously got laid off in the middle of filming a Geico commercial. So if you can like take a look and click on that link.
Was that the raccoons one? Was it
yes.
the commercial with the raccoons? Oh, I read it. It's a good story.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
It's pretty incredible. And like, so, I mean, it's like one of the most iconic commercials ever made. And he got laid off when they were filming like web videos for it. And he was actually like, had his hands like, he was like working up a scene I think he was dressed almost like, or he was doing things to mimic being a raccoon, like cooking food, like something completely ridiculous, but he was going above and beyond what he needed to do. And then found out that he got laid off in the middle of it. So he definitely puts his heart into everything, but I think like, he just like, take a look through his book, like super smart, like executions and great writing throughout. So, and also just read that story because it just shows that this industry can be kind of brutal. Separate yourself from your ideas. So this is from Kristen Sachs, who long time, like she was a writer that we worked with at 160 for a while. She's now a creative director and writer at Punk Ave, which is a digital shop here in Philadelphia. Kristen's just like an amazing person, like just like one of those like people, again, you want on your team where like you know that you can't take your things too personally. Like you have to be able to say like, is this a good idea? Like, is this not a good idea? This is not about like somebody disliking me or thinking that I'm not like good at what I do. Sometimes you just have to be able to like separate from it, and it makes for a much more healthy way of looking at your career. She then also came again with like a second one, that look for a boss, not a job, which I think is super insightful as you like embark on your career. Like you may look at places and look at the names on the door, but like think about who you're going to work with, who that person is that's going to be like your creative director, who's approving your work, who's going to push you to get better. Like find those things, because that's what you should really be looking at for like the long-term, like, you know, growth of yourself, because that's going to be more important than the name on the door. Advice is stupid. Do what you want. So this is Evan Monsky, who's now a creative director at 160/90. But we actually hired him because he was in this video that, again, you can take a look at online, where he was interviewing his high school basketball teammate, who was Kobe Bryant. So in the video, like, it was just funny, it was heartwarming, it was like, obviously, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And like, it was just like an incredible like thing. And he actually won like a regional Emmy for it, which he reminds us of. And I saw that and was like, this guy could be a great writer for us. Reached out to him, and like ultimately realized that he actually was a writer at a different agency, but like was able to bring him in through that. So his point about like do what you want, like he got that job because of like an outside pursuit, something he was doing outside that made me recognize like this guy's got talent, like we should have this type of brain working for us. So I think one of the presenters the last couple of weeks said like do things outside of your agency life, like figure out who you are and like find those like side projects, because they can actually help out. So a little bit flip with the advice. Then finally, write 100 headlines to get one good one. So this is from Justin Baijan, who is co-founder of Familiar Creatures, which is a small agency in Richmond, Virginia. He spent a bunch of time at Martin Agency as well. And I think that, you know, this is one where it's about like, you have to craft things, you have to work through things, and like, you may come up with a great idea or great headline right off the bat, but like, you need to like explore those different ideas, explore the different angles, like find different things, because like, there might be a bunch of terrible ones in there, but you might be able to find gold through that work. So, you know, I want to talk about then like applying some of those lessons, because I've just been showing a lot of type on screen, and try to give some pictures to it. So I do think, you know, finding sources of inspiration within great writing, like, so for the class that I had at Temple, like I created this Pinterest board that was just like constantly collecting what I thought were like really good examples of writing, some like from like 50 years ago, some from like this week. So, you know, I think it's a good place to go and like find, and like Pinterest is a great way to just like sort of gather all a bunch of different content and ideas, and keep them in place for like inspiration moving forward. But take a look at that Pinterest board. I'm going to show some of the like these lessons like brought to life through like iconic ads. So in don't use 8 words if 7 work. So yesterday you said tomorrow, just do it. I mean, that's literally 7 words right there that are just pitch perfect in everything that they're saying. I mean, a 4-word headline that just kind of encapsulates like procrastination, motivation, like getting yourself better. Like Nike, like their brand essence is like, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So like, this is just that ultimate like example of how you can motivate somebody. And you can tell, because you can tell the entire team thought it was an incredible line, because it's just the simple black type on a white background, and it does everything that it needs to do. So incredible way of like showing the economy of words that you should strive for. Make ads that don't feel like ads. So this is an installation from Sprint that is encouraging people to not text and drive. So taking the emoji, like, but bringing something to life that like, there's not a lot of writing within this. This is just like a concept. And that's like where it's so much about like developing the ideas and developing things that like, you know, this is probably written on a whiteboard in a room and like seemed like a crazy idea, but a team like chased it enough to be able to make it real. They're not an audience, they're people, which is what Kyle said. And I think the ultimate example of this is like the classic like VW ads of the 1960s. If you haven't, like, check out like a bunch of stuff as much as you can about like some of those, that era of advertising, because like an ad, like it makes your house look bigger. like that's how you talk to an audience in like a completely unique and interesting way, and like frame something that they're totally not expecting, especially back then because everything was so like hard sell. And here was like something that was smart and like taking a, like viewing the audience as people who like thought, and that was like kind of revolutionary at the time. Write Like You Speak. Citi did this classic campaign years ago that was lines like this, like money can't buy happiness, but it can buy marshmallows, which are kind of the same thing. So their tagline and theme was live richly. So how can like Citi allow you to live richly in like small moments in life? So it was that like kind of like bringing a personality to a credit card, which is something you normally don't expect. Best writers think visually. Like campaign like this for McDonald's, mobile ordering is here. It's going to work in every medium, digitally, banner ad. This is a great banner ad. Like this is a great like print ad. This is a great outdoor ad. Like this is a great ad in every country in the world. Like because it's just so perfectly thought out. So how can you think about that? Like you can edit down to where there are 0 words on an ad. Give it heart, make it smart. So this is a classic campaign that IBM did where using like city spaces to show that like, not just like talk about being smart, it's like showing ways that they were able to like solve problems for people in the city. And then the idea of writing 100 headlines to get one good one. So I'm going to take you through like a super classic case study here. This is the Economist advertising campaign that's been going on for decades, but it's because they just write incredibly smart lines incredibly well. So there are a bunch of ads like this, like don't make the same mistake once, great minds like a think, cure imposter syndrome. So, I mean, The Economist is so much just about like the smartest business people in the world read The Economist. Like that's what every ad says without saying that. So like they just take a strategy and like show it and like convey it in so many different ways that like you understand why it's completely timeless because they're doing it so well over and over again. So it's lonely at the top, bring something to read, Leader's Digest, like these lines, like, you know, they worked in like the year 2000, but like cure imposter syndrome was like from a campaign they just did like a couple months ago. A poster should contain no more than 8 words, which is the maximum the average reader can take in at a single glance. This, however, is a poster for Economist readers. So, I mean, this is one where like it's breaking the third wall, it's speaking to the consumer, it's making them feel a part of the joke. So like methods like that can totally work and do well. You can then, again, strip away all the words and do something visual and something that kind of has like a stunt factor to it. So a person walks by, the light appears, and like it just, you know, it's a great moment for anybody that's passing by that piece. Then the last 2, lose the ability to slip out of meetings unnoticed. And then I never read The Economist, management trainee, aged 42. So, I mean, I think that one on the left is like super smart. It's like subversively smart because like you think of like, you know, the big wig in a meeting is the one who thinks that like he's the smartest person in the world, but it's really the person who like if they leave, everybody notices. Like that's the true leader and that's who you want to be. So like I think there's just like so many layers of like how complex that line is, but it's just like utterly brilliant. Then on the right-hand side, I mean, it's like just using things in an unexpected way, like using a quote from somebody in a way that you're not expecting to basically say like, if you're not reading The Economist, like your career is not going places. So incredibly like smart like work, and you know, it's an iconic campaign for a reason. So that kind of wraps up my time, and like I just want to give like the summary of what I would say is like the most simple career advice I can give. Like first, be human, like think about the person you're talking to, like understand them, like create communication that people are going to like. Find insights, like search for them. Like you might get them sometimes from a strategist, you might get them from a brief, but like you want to like dig and find something that's like a unique truth about a person or a place or a product or whatever it is that you're like working into. Like find something and find your own unique spin on it. Craft your work. Like yes, sometimes the first thing you do is perfect and it's great and you can just leave it there. But then it's like, how can I make things better? How can I like pull out elements? How can I like strip this down to its core so it's just like the smartest, like best piece that's remaining, and just like really work on things and like hone your ability to do it, especially in the writing world. And then finally, just don't be an asshole. Like all those people that I asked for advice, like they're like wonderful people. Like they're just like people that I would love to work with, I have worked with, or I want to work with again. And like, you just want to like, you're going to get a lot farther in your career by being somebody who like people want to work with, and like bring something to the table that like people are going to enjoy to work with, and it'll make it a lot easier. So that is what I have so far. I would love to, we can talk questions. We can try to.
I think your people are absorbing your brilliance right now. At least that's what the chat's telling you. Do you want to unshare real quick?
Yeah.
Awesome. Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you for your question.
Hey man, good stuff. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So quick question. You kind of touched on one, how do you keep all your ideas together? And I think you referenced Pinterest a little bit, but is there any other sort of way you do that, like a notebook where you jot down all your thoughts, or your phone where you come up with something and then you put it in your phone? And then two-part question is, do you write for clients, or do you, now that you're at a different level, like write for clients when they come, or you know what I mean by that question? Do you go out and write something for a client and then send it in to bring them on, or is it wait for an RFP, right? Or
Yeah. So for the first part, I used to keep like always have like a notebook on me and just jot down thoughts. But over the last few years, I definitely have like a running like list in my notes app on my phone that I just like, even if it's just like funny scenes or random things or like little slices of life to just like get at the heart of like, oh, that was cool. Like some of them make sense, some of them don't. So definitely keep track of all those things because you'll forget them. To the second point, if I think I'm understanding the correct question, like, I mean, we're still like, the majority of the work that we're doing is coming from like clients are coming on board and like we're working with them, and like then we're beginning the process of like creating something for them. I mean, we have done, I think sometimes if like there's an idea out there and like you want to explore it, like there's ways that you can like try to do that, but it's not something that we've necessarily done as much to like pitch kind of coldly to a client. But I mean, we try to have as many conversations as we can to just at least get conversations going. Did that answer the question?
I'm going to assume that's a yes. So, I'm curious about that too. So, are there cases where you'll take out, like you'll proactively bring work to a client and say like, hey, here's a new angle, here's something new you ought to be trying, or you really kind of leave that to, it's an account kind of conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've just, everywhere I've been working recently has just been busy. So it's like, we're just thinking about the projects that we have like going on. But I do think like, you know, we always encourage at least our people to say like, if you want us to try to pitch somebody or go out to somebody, like, please like bring us an idea or bring us a thought, or like even just say like, make an introduction to X brand. Like we have a new business guy, Corey, who's like awesome, and he'll just like, he'll have coffee with anyone. So like he'll at least make the intro. And sometimes I think like we'll equip him with like thoughts or ideas, or here's how you can like, you know, at least frame that conversation. I mean, I think if we did do just sort of like, here's a campaign to hand over, like it may work, but
I feel like a lot of pro bono work operates that way.
Yeah.
So like, and this is just my experience, I feel like a lot of the award-winning work that you see at Cannes is the product of proactive briefs to either clients that are existing or, you know, a pro bono client that you want to win. So Brendan, I'm making sure you've had this experience where someone has this great idea for like an anti-tobacco campaign or like an Alzheimer's organization, and you'll try and get a meeting with them and then pitch it. I feel like you're always like, you've got like your client work, and you're pitching to them. And I feel like we're always trying to like reach out to clients. And then you do that game where someone sends a listserv out, like being like, does anybody know anybody at this company? And so.
Yeah. And I think to that other point too, is like when there's clients that you have on the roster and like they might be asking for one thing, I think the biggest thing that you have to continually do is like solve for problems that they haven't like thought of necessarily. And that's where like the proactivity like comes into play. And that ultimately ends up to like better longer term relationships with the clients, but also then the creatives feel better about the work they're doing. Cause it's like, yeah, I thought about doing a campaign about X, even though they were never even thinking of that angle.
That makes a ton of sense. That's super insightful. Henry, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you for your question.
Cool. Thank you, Brendan. That was really cool. I guess my question would be more about when you were talking about your night and weekend portfolio. I was wondering if you can go a bit into more detail about how you kind of went about that, whether it was through pro bono work, kind of going up to different companies. And the other question I had was whether copywriting was something that you knew you always wanted to do, or whether that was just what you landed on in your first job and that's what you just kind of took off with, and if you tried anything else.
Yeah, so nights and weekend portfolio was basically, some of it was like we had done some work with our existing clients, but like some of the work got killed or something. Some of it like we had ideas to like push and just be like, well, these are the ideas that we wanted to like make. And so it was just like kind of rounding out a little bit more. But we did work on like one spec campaign that was just like completely out of left field because I just didn't want a whole portfolio of like shopping mall ads. So it was like finding something different to get outside of that world. Thankfully, I like got a job right away, or else I would have like continued to add more and more pieces like outside of that world. And then the second part, like I was always like writing kind of came naturally to me. Like my mom was a writer, so it was just like something that like I had done. I actually wrote for the newspaper at Penn State, so like I thought like journalism was something I wanted to be able to do. Advertising, I just like the journalism industry was falling apart at the time, so it just felt like, what can I do that actually has much more of a future? So then I found like advertising like as an outlet for it, and tried to like, I was like, well, I'm a poor drawer, so I'm not going to be like an art director. And I think that like, you know, writing is something that like came fairly naturally and easily to me. So it seemed like the most natural fit. And I'm not organized to be like an account person or, I mean, the only other thing I would ever think about doing in the agency world is like strategy, just because I find it to be interesting. And I think I could be good at that, but copywriting was where it was.
Yeah, I think I could be a writer.
Every writer, like I didn't share that two different writers said like, as their piece of advice was, the copywriter writes the best brief or something to that effect. Or if you get a bad strategy, you rewrite it yourself, which I didn't want to put in there because I didn't want to like show the sometimes like,
I find every opportunity I can to tell Joe that strategists are useless.
He does. It's really
I do.
taking a toll on my self-worth. Thanks, Dan.
But I also think that literally anybody can be a copywriter. Anyone can do this job. We just spend more time on it than anyone else.
It is true. Like I go back and forth where like, there's times where I'm like, yeah, any of my friends that like are funny or interesting, like if they sat down and like did this, they would be as good or better than me at it.
It really is interesting.
That's a secret we shouldn't tell.
No, it's just like if you spend, the question is, do you want to spend like 80 hours a week on it? And then do you want to like have to deal like 70 of those hours are like not fun things to be doing? You know what I mean? So it's like if you can live for the 10 hours that are really like awesome and engaging, conceptual and bright, then you can be a writer. But if you don't want to just wade through the muck day after day, year after year, turn around.
The self-deprecation with these copywriting folks.
Yeah, run. Honestly, run. If you want to work in advertising, go to vet school.
All right. Maureen, I'm going to unmute you for your question.
I'm kidding, everybody.
He's not. He's serious.
Well, thanks. Hi, Brendan. So as someone who's from Philadelphia and a huge Philly sports fan, I just wanted to commend you on that Philly hype video that just came out. And I was curious if you were behind the copy or what your team's like strategy behind the copy for that hype video was.
Oh, well, thank you. Hopefully it's not the highlight of the Major League Baseball season.
I know.
That was actually one where the vast majority of that was actually written by Rachel, who
Okay.
I think what was great is that like I'm a huge sports fan and like Phillies fan my entire life. Rachel's like not really a sports fan, and I think she just came at it like it was an example of like her coming in like just from a completely different perspective and just like not doing like cliche sports stuff. So it was just like she came up with like that script, and there was like, I mean, we worked through it a little bit together, but like, you know, it was one of those things where like it was just like a simple idea, like a simple theme that was applied to the script, and then like thankfully it came to life. So
Yeah.
it was also super quick because we didn't know if there was actually going to be a baseball season.
I thought there might be more banter to be had there, but
Oh no.
I mean, I could talk about it for a while, but I'm not going to bore the rest of the class with it.
Where did you find it? I'd love to see it.
It is on the Truth and Consequences Instagram page. So.
Oh, that's cheating, Maureen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's on the Phillies Instagram page as well.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was like it was a super quick turnaround. They had Jimmy Rollins as the voice like lined up, so we wrote the script with him in mind. So he was awesome. Like he was great in the studio, because you never know with an athlete. Like sometimes it sounds great on paper, and then you get in there and they're just like they have no charisma. And he was actually really good. That's one thing. Don't sell like athletes or people that are not like comfortable on camera to be comfortable on camera, because they will not be. It can lead to hours and hours of frustration.
One of my absolute worst bloopers from early in my career is really making Mike Ditka very unhappy. Not a good day for me. Alexa, I'm going to unmute you for your question.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. So when you were starting out, how was the mentorship at those smaller agencies? And do you think it was different than if you would have started at a larger place?
Yeah, I mean, it was like actually Jim Walls, who was the first speaker, like the first week, he was one of my mentors, like when I was first starting out at 160. And like, I mean, it was one of those things where like he was great. He was also like, he's like a stickler on certain things and like would beat the shit out of my copy at times. And I was like, it was good. Like looking back, it's like you need that like person who beats your stuff up and like makes it better. So there was always like a culture of mentorship, and then like that, I mean, just led to then like I felt like I had to pass that along and like be somebody who also did that for other like younger creatives. I mean, I think in general, like if a place has like a culture of that, like in general, you're gonna find most people in this industry are like cool and willing to help out. And I think like you'll generally find it, but it should be something like if you're on interviews, like asking about that and like finding ways like that, and like speaking to people about like who's been mentoring them while they're there, like because that's a better indicator than like we have a program where you will be assigned a mentor, because those things happen, and whenever they happen they completely fall apart. Like mentorship has to happen like naturally. So I would always ask like, who's been your mentor here, and like how have they helped your career?
Well, thanks.
That's crafty. Because who's not going to say, oh yeah, of course we have a great mentorship program.
Yeah, it's like if you have to have a mentorship program, it's because you've had poor mentorship.
We have one more question from chat. Are the communication arts, the books that you showed, are they available outside of academia, or where would people get their hands on those?
I believe you can go on Communication Arts site and order back. You could, I don't know, you might have to pay for those. If you can get into an agency, there's usually like a stack of them in the back of somewhere, and like just try to steal them. But like, I don't know.
I'm going to bet that there's some photocopied, like if you searched PDF or something, not that I'm suggesting anybody steals any content from anybody, but
I would throw it, I would pose that to the larger Reddit community, and someone will be able to locate them in like 2 minutes.
There's a question in the chat that says, what does your writing process look like? How do you manage your time with that process? I'll say my process begins with a panic attack, every brief. I've never empathized more with that. Like, anxiety is good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of schools of thought of like, do you research a lot, or do you like kind of come in like from an outside perspective and what works best? I generally like to like research everything and like look up a bunch of stuff about like a product or whatever I'm working on. But I mean, my writing process is a little messy, I would say. Like, I just fill up a notepad like with as much like chicken scratch and like starter thoughts of ideas as I can over the course of a couple of days, and like, or as much time as is allowed, and just kind of like go from like figure out which ones work, which ones don't. I would also, I mean, that's where like partnering up with an art director or like having a partner like is very valuable, because then you start to bounce each other's ideas and figure out what has like validity. Like maybe an idea can come out of nowhere through a brainstorm. Like, so that's like, it's gonna start to like formulate. But like when I like sit down to actually write, like I feel like it's the last thing, and it's like I probably don't allow enough time as I should, because I just sort of think that like I can pull like the muscle memory out, but it's like the idea and the insight is the thing that takes the longest time. It's the writing that like, you know, you can, that's sort of like the last thing you need to be able to do. I was just watching Ozark, and there's a scene where what's her name, Ruth, is yelling at her cousin, and she's like, you have to write a paper, and he just like is sitting there and he's like, it's all up here. And like I actually like empathize with that, because I was like, you really do just like formulate it in your brain, and you have it knocking around in there for a long time, and then like I put it down on paper. I don't know, Dan, what do you do?
I cry a lot.
Yeah.
I actually have the exact same process of you. Notepad. In fact, like if you look at my notepad, it's just filled with just like I feel like writing is a career that rewards people who can't stop thinking. And I don't mean that in like a limitless, like I'm a genius. I mean like I'm on antidepressants and I can't control my thoughts at any time. But what it means is that I found a career that it rewards you for this kind of whirring engine that you've got spinning. So I feel like I'm always working, which is a blessing and a curse, because I don't understand the concept of peace. But at the same time, it's like I have a notepad, and I'll just write a word or a thought, or I'll be in bed and I'll like have my phone by it, and I'll get out of bed and like we'll put the thought down. And it's funny because it's just like it's always going on. It's like you read a post on Reddit, you read a comment on Instagram, and then like you said, very little of the process is writing. And I remember like a group creative director once when I worked in-house at Yahoo, Jared Kozel, he's a SVP at Moxie right now. He said something to me along the lines of like, writers spend very little time writing. And I found that to be very confusing, because this was before I worked in advertising, but it's true. Like you spend a lot of time revising work, presenting work, concepting work, ideating work. Very, very, very little of that time is spent actually writing it.
Man, that's so funny. I guess, I mean, I obviously do way different writing than you guys, but for me, like like, yeah, all of the ideation stuff happens away from the desk, but the hard part for me is like sitting down in front of the desk and having that discipline of just like, all right, I'm gonna sit here, I'm not gonna tab anything, I'm just gonna like stay in this document until the ideas get out. I don't know. I guess it's maybe like an interplay of the two, but maybe you guys are just way more productive than I am in the loose.
I also think it's funny. I feel like this quote unquote, like, Brendan, I mean, you've been working and I've been working in advertising for 5 years. Obviously you've been working in advertising, you know, a bit longer than that. A lot longer than that.
I get it.
No, you no, a bit longer. I'm not, I was like, I forget it. But there's this quote,
you were doing it before the internet happened, right? Yeah.
What?
I said
no, yeah. It's like, did you like?
You've been doing it so long.
Grade?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you were advertising Jesus's water in the wine ad. No, but I actually texted Joe about how like young you looked, like because I saw your college ID and I was like, what is this guy's skincare routine? That's true. There's this saying about kill your you know, this saying like kill your darlings. I feel like the first thing that like is just nailed in your head is just like right. And I don't know about you, but sometimes like the first idea is really good. Like, yeah. And you like it's just, you're going to be told this as like a junior and an intern. And like, you know, as you ride the ranks from mid to senior, that like, just keep going, because 9 times out of 10, the best work is going to come from just brute force attack. Just sit down and just keep going. But it's like you don't need to follow the rules. Sometimes the first idea is the best one, and that's okay. And don't feel self-conscious about it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and that's where like Evan, the one guy, was like that I took advice from, where he was like, don't take advice from people, because there are these like random weird rules that you hear, like don't go with a first thought, or it's sometimes there's like great campaigns that are like obvious as hell. It's just that they're like perfectly done, or they're perfectly cast, or the writing is like super spot on. Like it might be a super obvious idea, but like that can work really well. So like I agree that there's some adages and maxims out there that just don't hold any water.
I think the Emerald Nuts campaign, That's Good, is a really good example of that. And I know that it's Zoe Kessler and Molly Wolkoff, the creative team that came up with that. They found a review on Amazon for Emerald Nuts that just said, yes, good. And that was the entire campaign. Now, the way it came to life was obviously gorgeous and stunning. And like, that was BFG, which is sadly no longer around. Like, oh man, I'd love to just like chat about this, but I feel like there are agencies that are amazing and then they're just are forgotten, like Cliff Freeman and Partners. I don't think anyone like, you know, in their 20s or 30s, like knows what that agency is. Yet they've done some of the most amazing ads and like bird some of like the greatest creatives, but I don't know.
Well, you heard it here first. Use the first idea. The rest of them are crap. No, that was awesome.
But it's an industry of conflicting advice, because I told you to write 100 headlines, but then also sometimes the first one is the best one. So there's no magic solution to anything in this industry. We're really selling it well, aren't we, Dan?
I think I think this is the best job in the world, literally. And it's like, I will complain about it, but I feel so lucky to like be able to just sit in a chair and like get paid to come up with ideas. I mean that. And it's stressful and it's exhausting. Like my brother is like applying for Harvard Business School. My other brother is in like vet school. And I think about like my family, about like what they're like saving animals, and like Andrew is like consultant. And I'm like, I just get to write tweets about Pringles and it's fucking awesome. And it's like, that's the coolest shit ever. And yes, I think that it comes with like the trials and tribulations of wearing your heart on your sleeve and constantly being told no. Like I heard this the other day that like working in advertising is like JV Hollywood, which I thought was very funny, because you get all the egos with like half of the, you know, creative output. But it's a great job if you can do it. Now, I don't know like how you do it for that long. Like I always look at like folks like, and Brendan, we've never met, but like I respect like the longevity in the career. Like I'm so scared like that. If I ask a question, it's like, how do you stay around? I know that everyone's trying to break in an industry, but what is the key to longevity in an industry where I feel like, you know, after you turn a certain age, they just take you behind the shed and, you know. tell you to look at the flowers. That was a reference to Of Mice and Men, by the way. That wasn't like, that's not, forget it. That was unnecessary.
I mean, I think longevity, I think you have to continually look at things differently. I mean, like that's where like, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to continue to like work at agencies, and that's why we started our own, because it was like, let's actually like figure out the thing that we can do and build it in a way that we want to do it. Don't do that right before a global pandemic hits, but like in general, it's been like really fun and it's like its own challenge. Like I think because that's the majority of what we are as people, is like we're problem solvers, and like we want to challenge ourselves, and like, yeah, it's still fun to like come up with new ideas and develop new stuff, but like it's also just like, how can I build a better version of the thing that I've been working in my entire life?
That feels like great parting wisdom, unless you have any other truth bombs to drop on us.
No, I don't. And I don't have any skincare solutions. I do actually think that when you work in advertising, like you do feel younger. Like I see people that are my age that I'm like friends with, and I'm like, yo, they seem old. Like what's like, and I think part of this industry is you're around like younger people who are like constantly bringing like ideas. It keeps you young. So that's a good thing too. You're all young, so you don't have to worry about that yet.
Your time will come. All right. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Brendan. That was super insightful. As usual, guys, we'll post the assignment. Oh, you want to talk about the assignment?
The assignment, yeah.
I'm like wrapping it up, and we have not even like done the thing.
Yeah, here's the assignment. Can all see that? So the assignment is to improve one of the greatest campaigns of all time. So this was a bit of a challenge to figure out like what the assignment could be for this. And I ran through that entire Economist case study. But I think one of the things that I think you can do there is like try your hand at creating those ads, but then ultimately try to like find your own unique spin on it. So this is about like showing both your fundamentals and your creativity. So the fundamental part of it is to show you can write headlines by attempting to write your 10 best Economist headlines. Like look at all those, study those, there's more online, like find the ones that are out there. The headline should still convey their long established brand position, like the smartest business people on earth read The Economist. So like write your own versions of it. The best thing about these, for even like the most poorly designing copywriter, can like lay out an Economist ad that looks fine. So show the fundamentals, but then show like creativity. And this is where everybody, from my understanding, has different disciplines and backgrounds. So then show how you can adapt and extend the strategy and this classic campaign in new and unexpected ways within your intended field. So if you're a strategist, that could be finding new social channels and mediums to extend it. If you're looking at design and art direction, could you find new digital and outdoor ways to express the idea? Like think about that light bulb execution. As a writer, could you develop video or social media ideas for the campaign? Like try to take like what's a pretty classic like campaign and bring it to new interesting channels. I was watching Jonathan's presentation from last week on media strategy, and I think one of the things that he showed was that Chiquita banana campaign, where it was like taking like super simple like advertising, which was just a smart headline and a simple design, but then they found like new and interesting ways to like bring it to the world. That's what we're looking for within this assignment. So like show you can do like, you can deliver like great headline writing, but then show creativity in unexpected ways of bringing this assignment or bringing the brand to life. So, I mean, I think that's where like the bottom part, like people who make hiring decisions want people who can deliver what's expected, but also to take it to a place that no one's imagined. So that's all I'm asking you to do, is just like improve one of the greatest campaigns in the history of advertising.
Should be pretty easy, guys.
Yeah. But I have found, I did in my class at Temple, like even like very early copywriters, like they're able to like take that Economist formula and start to like work in it ways that like you can just find like interesting insights and different ways to like convey, you know, just finding new spins on like a very classic campaign. So does that all make sense?
I assume this is one of those silence means, oh, we should have done the trick. Should have done the.
I'm assuming that everyone is understanding the assignment.
Yeah, exactly. Unless they speak up. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Brendan. That was super insightful. Super excited to see the assignment submissions for this week. These are going to be awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and good luck to all of you, and good luck as you embark upon this wonderful career, as Dan lovingly painted the picture of your future career.
Dan, do you want to cry in the last frame, and then we'll just like leave that as our
yeah, just
outro?
like the Michael Jordan meme.
Yeah, come on, give us.
I'll do it. Like that's the problem.
Yeah, do it.
Like I'll
cry.
No.
Give us a little.
All right, I'm leaving. Goodbye. I'll cry.
Right,
I'll
bye,
call
everybody.
you after. I'll cry on the phone to you. I'm actually gonna call you and cry on the phone to you. Bye, everybody.
Guys.